Without further ado, I'd like to invite my colleague and fellow director from Knowledge Action Change, Professor Jerry Stimson, to say a few words about the report.
Thank you very much, Paddy. And actually, I find this quite an exciting day because this is a real labour of love by a big team of people who've been writing this since the beginning of the year under the tutorship of Harry Shapiro, who will tell you a little bit more about it in a minute. And I'm also very pleased about the report because we need to put tobacco harm reduction on the agenda. The report is called No Fire, No Smoke, to draw attention to the fact that it's not tobacco that's the problem, it's not nicotine that's the problem, but it's the ingestion of burnt vegetable matter, which produces the tars and gases which have serious consequences for health and for many smokers' premature mortality. So safer nicotine products such as snus, e-cigarettes, heat-not-burn products, they all offer smokers a safer alternative to smoking. And I've worked in harm reduction over many decades now, in drugs harm reduction before getting interested in tobacco harm reduction. And I'm really convinced that the availability of safer nicotine products is part of a global public health revolution. And for somebody who's worked in public health, it's very interesting because it's not being driven by public health experts. It's not public health experts who are telling smokers that there's a safer alternative. It's not like some of the projects I've been involved in where you try to attract millions of dollars to conduct an intervention program to persuade people to behave in a different way. This is all being driven by two dynamics. It's the consumers and the products. So quite extraordinarily in the public health arena, this is something which has not cost the taxpayer anything. No public money has gone into persuading people to use safer nicotine products. It's smokers who've heard about the products, made their choices to use something that's safer. I say with no help from public health and others. In fact, in many countries and in many places, considerable antipathy from public health, and we might have got much further with the adoption of safer nicotine products if public health experts had put their weight behind this. I mean, that's a global statement. There are countries in which the situation is better. And there are some successes. In the report, we do deal with 4 country case studies which show that when the products are there and where there is interest, people do switch to safer products. Norway is quite staggering. The uptake of snus in the last 20 years and the rapid decline in smoking and the uptake of snus, and only 1% of young women in Norway now smoke. 14% of them use snus, but only 1% of young women are smokers, and that's the disappearance of smoking amongst young women in Norway, and that is due to snus. We know from Sweden, and particularly the work of my friend Lars Ramström here, how the uptake of snus has led to the lowest prevalence of smoking in Europe and the lowest rates of tobacco-related mortality in Europe. And as we say in the report, and taken from Lars's work, if the rest of Europe were like Sweden with respect to smoking, and the uptake of snus, then there'd be about 300,000 premature lives saved a year. So that's the scale of the benefit. Japan, in the last few years, the uptake of heat-not-burn products and tobacco sales are just plummeting in Japan. Tobacco sales have dropped by, this is like the Conservative Party conference where the things fall off the wall. Tobacco sales dropped by 25% in 2 years. Now that is something that the WHO and others should be shouting about. This is a real public health revolution. The UK, doing well, continued and quite dramatic declines in smoking prevalence, down to about 15% daily smokers since a drop of about 5% in the period when e-cigs have become available, and about 6% of the population, adult population, are e-cig users. So, as in Sweden and Norway, where you've got the smoking going down and the snus going up, or you've got the e-cigs going up. So we're looking towards perhaps a crossover point in the UK. So it works. Harm reduction works, and tobacco harm reduction works. Accessible, attractive alternatives, consumer choice. And that is driving something which I think historically is going to be quite important. So we're here in Geneva to launch this report because, as you all know, this is the week of the WHO FCTC meeting. And one would have hoped that by now the WHO FCTC parties and the WHO FCT Secretariat would have woken up to the benefits of tobacco harm reduction, because it is there in the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Article 1D mentions harm reduction as one of the 3 strategies for tobacco control alongside demand and supply reduction. But as we know, the harm reduction element has been disregarded, and yesterday Vera da Costa e Silva said that something to the effect that she's very dismissive of harm reduction. And that shouldn't continue, because that costs lives. Every time you say something negative about e-cigarettes or snus, or that's perhaps another smoker who decides to continue smoking because they've heard these products are not good or they're bad. So the aim of what we're doing is to highlight the importance of making healthy choices, the easy choices for consumers. But we've also got to think about policymakers as well, and help policymakers to make healthy policy choices, the easy choices. So we hope that this will kickstart more debate about harm reduction and restore it to its proper place within the whole panoply of ways in which we discourage people from smoking. I'll now hand over to Harry Shapiro, who is a writer of the report, author of the report, editor of the report, brought together lots of people in the work, and Harry will tell you more about the report itself.
Thanks, Jerry. Good morning, people. I'm going to now count to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And in that space, someone, somewhere in the world has died from a smoking-related disease. And I make that point because I think anyone involved in international tobacco control, however you define it, we're all starting from the same position. We're all starting from the position of trying to reduce the death and disease toll from smoking cigarettes. So we all start from that same position, except when it comes to harm reduction. And it really shouldn't be like that. As Jerry has mentioned, the phrase is actually enshrined in the FCTC, although not defined. And the reality, of course, as we know, is very different. WHO will not accept that safer nicotine products are a legitimate response to reduce this disease and death toll from smoking, which, as our press release said this morning, is definitely a missed opportunity, and really I would go so far as to say it's a pretty tragic situation. So I suppose in a way we shouldn't need to have written this report. What we were trying to achieve should have been lined up alongside all the other interventions to try and reduce smoking, which is smoking bans in public, age restrictions to minors, health warnings on packaging and so on. They're all legitimate ways of trying to reduce smoking, as are all these products. However, we are where we are, unfortunately, so we needed really to try and map the global landscape of safer nicotine products in order in some way to sort of set the record straight, and I'll explain a little bit about that in a minute. So the starting point of the report is the epidemic of smoking, which, according to the WHO, claims 6 million lives a year, could claim up to 1 billion lives by the end of the century, and in some parts of the world, particularly poorer countries, the actual rates of smoking are going up, so it could well be because of population growth. So it could be that that billion estimate is actually an underestimate. So as you go through the report, we tackle the market, the products, how they've come onto the market, how they've come onto the scene. We talk about the consumers, and we have some case studies in there from consumers about how literally life-changing and life-saving the switch has been for them from cigarettes to these products. And then we look at the science and the clinical evidence. Now, that is where a lot of confusion and misinformation resides. So this report overall has got some 300 independent evidence-based sources for people to examine and study for themselves. And what we've just tried to do is go on the balance of the evidence, citing reports from Public Health England, Royal College of Physicians, National Academy of Sciences, from Australia, New Zealand, and countries all over the world that have had a look at actually the evidence. And it is, again, I use the word tragic, that there is so much confusion and misinformation that's confusing smokers, it's confusing health professionals, legislators, politicians, the media, and the wider public, that somehow all these products are just as dangerous, and in some cases the claim is even more dangerous than smoking cigarettes, and it just isn't the case. So then we move on to talk about regulation and control, which of course is extremely important in this situation, because if people are denied access to these products, and in some countries are even like to be arrested if they're seen to be out on the street vaping, this is clearly not giving people access to a right to health, which leads on to the last section of the report, which is, for me, is really the kind of core of the whole thing, and that's harm reduction as it relates to human rights and civil liberties. The right to health, the universal right to health, is enshrined in many international treaties, as is the ambition that people should be empowered to take control of their own health and well-being. And like Jerry, I come from a long background of drug harm reduction. 2 decades ago, in this very city, the WHO prohibited their staff from attending an international drug harm reduction conference. And we seem to have gone full circle, and we're back where we were all those years ago, but now it's tobacco harm reduction. Back then, there were drug user activists, along with some enlightened health professionals, that were looking to protect themselves from the worst ravages of primarily injecting drug use. So opioid therapies, substitution therapies, needle exchange, more recently drug consumption rooms, drugs to reverse heroin overdose, and so on. And this to me is a continuation of all that work that I've been involved in, except instead of patients and clients and drug users, you've got consumers who also are trying to find a way out of smoking and all the harms that causes, while at the same time either carrying on to consume nicotine or maybe as a gateway to eventually quitting altogether, which many of them do. So it's on that consumer note that I'd like to pass over to Nancy, who is president of the major international consumer organisation.
Hello. As Harry said, my name is Nancy. I am the president of the governing board of INCO, which is a umbrella group of over 30 consumer organizations globally. I'm also the co-founder and co-director of AVCA, which is the New Zealand Consumer Advocate Tobacco Harm Reduction Organization. This report, I'm so glad this finally came out. Thank you, Harry. My colleague and I will tell you, and I'm sure any of the advocates here will also tell you, consumers, our voices tend not to be heard. We have to fight because everybody, the conversation is taken over by the public health people and the scientists and the politicians, and it's like, wait, nothing about us, with nothing of us without us. We're lucky in a way, Steve and I, and quite a few of us here, that we've been able to engage with our politicians and our ministries of health to get them to understand and listen to us, because we are the consumers, we are the voters. However, one of the big things that we focus on is that harm reduction is a human right. And as I think Jerry brought it up and Harry also brought it up, okay? We have the right to self-determination. We have the right to choose healthier options for ourselves. We're very lucky in that we can do that, because there are plenty of places in the world where they don't have that option. They don't have the access. They don't have the ability to seek tobacco harm reduction, because they will wind up in jail or they will get a fine. And that is wrong. And that is based on the policies that come out of the WHO FCTC with their mindset of quit or die. And that kills people, and that's not acceptable. Now, in my experience, how this whole vaping thing came out, for me personally, I'm a former smoker, I smoked for 30 years, okay? I sought out an alternative, okay? I found that alternative. And then when I found that alternative, I found other people who were looking for the same thing. And we became a community, and we shared this information with other people. And we've helped other people, because we felt that if you find something good, you want to share it with somebody. All right, we get very angry. I get very angry, as you can tell. I get very angry with somebody trying to tell me what to do based on something that isn't true. And right now, in areas such as Africa, in areas such as Asia Pacific, people don't have those choices. They don't have those options. People are dying, okay? Why? Why is that happening? Because they don't have choice. They don't have access. The concept of tobacco harm reduction is perceived by these politicians and these public health people as some kind of big tobacco construct. And that's very offensive, because it's not. It's a consumer-driven thing. We started, this is ours, we own it, okay? If you want to know about it, you talk to us. But that isn't happening, okay? I was there yesterday and we all got thrown out, okay? And I sat there and I was just shocked at what these people were saying, because it's cognitive dissonance to the nth degree. They don't want to accept it. They don't want to understand it. It's my way or the highway. So this report right here will help a lot of us to be able to say, okay, here's the data, because it's here. Whether they accept it or not, I don't know, but at least we have it now. And for that, I thank Harry. Harry, thank you. So, thank you for listening.